Before we get started, I have a quick request for you. I'm really trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. Hitting that goal would mean the world to me. If you could hit that subscribe button, that single click gives me huge motivation to keep making videos for you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. The hand materialized out of thin air. One moment, Shine Whitflower was reaching for her chair, smoothing the back of her black dress, ready to finally collapse after 14 hours on her feet. The next, a perfectly manicured hand shot across the table, stopping her cold. "Excuse me." The voice was pure ice, layered with silk. Shine looked up slowly. The woman standing opposite her was a vision in a beaded champagne gown, her dark hair swept into an immaculate updo, diamond earrings blazing under every chandelier. She was the kind of woman who had spent a lifetime perfecting effortless grace. "This table is reserved," the woman stated, her tone unwavering. "VIP only." The ballroom around them was a testament to extravagant wealth. Crystal glasses gleamed, white orchids cascaded, and Seoul's elite lounged on velvet chairs as if they'd been born there. This was the Park Foundation Charity Gala, the sort of event where an invitation alone could redefine a career. Shine held one. "I know," Shine replied, her voice calm. "I was invited." The woman, Minchae by name, an influencer, a socialite, the daughter of a family that had clawed its way back from disgrace and never forgotten the ascent, eyed Shine from head to toe. Slowly, deliberately. "I don't think so." "My name is on this seating card." Shine gestured to it. There, in elegant gold lettering, was Shine Whitflower. Minchae picked it up, gave it a dismissive glance, and set it back down as if it were street litter. There must be a mistake. The makeup teams are seated near the back. And the room fell silent. Not all at once, but a ripple effect, table by table, conversation by conversation, the ambient hum fading until the quiet pressed in on Shine's ears like a physical weight. She felt every eye in the room fix on her. She'd been here before. The swift appraisal, the silent calculation, the moment a room decides your belonging before you've uttered a word. Shine met Minchae's gaze, unwavering. "I'm not on the makeup team tonight," she said. "I'm a guest." "Well," Minchae offered a smile as thin as parchment. Someone clearly made an error. Then she did something that sucked the air from the entire room. She pushed Shine, not with force, but with a deliberate, flat palm against her shoulder, gesturing towards the back of the hall as if redirecting a lost delivery driver. Shine didn't falter, didn't cry out, didn't raise her voice. She simply straightened, met Minchae's eyes one last time, and then turned and walked away. The composure in her bearing was so absolute that several people later remarked it felt as though she'd chosen to leave, rather than been ejected. Across the ballroom, half concealed by a pillar near the bar, a man witnessed it all, and something in his expression shifted. His name was Sang-hoon. Those who feared him, and there were many, called him by other names, but Sang-hoon was his name. Tall, still, clad entirely in black, he possessed an authority that compelled a room to recalibrate around him without a word. He'd watched Minchae perform for years, recognized her type, status-obsessed, territorial, someone who mistook access for inherent worth. But at this moment his attention wasn't on Minchae, it was on Shine. Moving through the throng with her head held high, her hands relaxed at her sides, and something about it struck a chord deep within him, a place he hadn't felt anything in for a very long time. He set down his glass. His associate Yun-seo materialized at his elbow, his gaze sweeping the room. "Should I?" "No." Sang-hoon's eyes followed Shine's exit. Yun-seo followed his gaze. "You know who she is." It wasn't a question. Yun-seo knew almost everything. That was his utility. "Yes," Sang-hoon confirmed. "And you arranged her invitation." "I did." Yun-seo paused. "Minchae is going to be a problem." Sang-hoon picked up his glass again, studied it, then set it back down. "Minchae already is not a problem. What she doesn't know yet is what kind." He said nothing more. He didn't need to. But he remained exactly where he was for the rest of the evening, his gaze fixed on the space where Shine had been, replaying the way she'd departed. The following morning, Minchae awoke to silence. Her manager wasn't returning calls. Two brand partnerships she'd been on the verge of finalizing had inexplicably gone cold. A charity board she'd been vying for membership on sent a polite but firm email informing her the position had been filled internally. No explanation, no warning, no one to blame. She sat at her vanity for a long time, staring blankly at her phone. She didn't connect the dots, not yet. Meanwhile, Shine was on the phone with her exhibition sponsor, listening to words she hadn't anticipated. "We're reassessing our commitments for the quarter," the voice on the other end said, carefully rehearsed. "I'm sure you understand." Shine understood perfectly. She ended the call and sat in her studio, surrounded by sketches, color swatches, and photographs of young artists whose faces she knew intimately. Her multicultural beauty exhibition, 3 years of relentless work, of reaching into communities denied a platform, was suddenly on precarious ground. She didn't panic. She pulled out her notebook and began to make a list. That was what most people underestimated about Shine. They saw the polished elegance of her demeanor and assumed she was merely ornamental. They never saw the engine beneath. The hours she'd spent poring over contracts, cultivating relationships, learning every system designed to exclude her well enough to dismantle it quietly from within. She would figure this out. She just hadn't counted on encountering Sang-hoon at a gallery in Itaewon 2 days later. She was there to meet a potential new collaborator, a ceramicist whose work she wanted to feature. He was there for reasons she didn't immediately grasp, standing before a sculpture like a man who had accidentally wandered into a peaceful sanctuary and wasn't ready to leave. He noticed her first. "You were at the gala," he stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple observation. "So were you," Shine replied, having noticed him in the crowd. He almost smiled. "You left early. I finished what I came to do." It wasn't entirely true, but it was the version she felt comfortable sharing with a stranger. He tilted his head slightly, studying her as one might study a painting that defies easy categorization. "What did you come to do?" "Meet people. Make connections for my exhibition." She paused. "You?" "The same, minus the exhibition." There was a beat of silence. Something in his delivery was so dry it almost made her laugh. She didn't, but it was a near thing. His name, he told her, was Sang-hoon. He offered no further details. She didn't ask, but he did inquire about the exhibition, and unlike most, he actually listened to her answer, not just nodding along or scanning the room, but truly listening, his eyes on her face, asking follow-up questions that demonstrated he'd absorbed her words. She found that disarmingly unexpected. When she mentioned the sponsorship falling through, he asked, "What kind of replacement are you looking for?" "Not money," she said immediately, because that was always people's first assumption, and it was never what she truly needed most. "Credibility. If the right people show up, the funding follows. I need someone who understands the arts community well enough to make introductions that actually mean something." He was quiet for a moment. "I might know some people," he said, carefully. Shine looked at him. "Why would you help me?" He looked back at her and offered something she hadn't expected. "Because you walked away from that table like you had somewhere better to be, and I'd like to know where that is." She agreed to one meeting. That was all. The contact he arranged was a gallery director named Kwon Ji-young, sharp, direct, with a network that spanned every sector of Seoul's art and philanthropy world. Shine had attempted to reach her twice through conventional channels, each time politely hitting a wall. Ji-young met them at a small restaurant in Bukchon. She arrived 5 minutes early, examined Shine's portfolio on her tablet for precisely 4 minutes, then set it down. "Why hasn't anyone platformed this before?" she asked, not unkindly, but with blunt directness. "Because the people who control platforms decided it wasn't for them," Shine replied. Ji-young turned to Sang-hoon. "You vouch for this?" "I introduced you," he said. "She can speak for herself." Ji-young turned back to Shine. A pause hung in the air, the kind where someone is weighing whether you are the genuine article or a well-crafted imitation. "Send me the full proposal by Friday," she said finally. "I have a space opening in 6 weeks. It's not ideal timing, but it's available." After she left, Shine sat opposite Sang-hoon with the peculiar stillness of someone trying desperately not to reveal how much something had just meant to them. "You didn't pitch it for me?" she asked. "You didn't need me to." She studied him. "Most people in your position would have." "I know." He poured tea into both cups, though neither of them had touched it yet. "Would you have wanted me to?" "No," she said. "I know that too." That was when she grasped something fundamental about him. It wasn't that he held back out of passivity, it was that he'd paid attention to who she truly was, and made a decision based on that understanding. In her experience, that was rarer than any amount of money or influence. She picked up her tea. How do you know Ji Young? I funded the restoration of a cultural archive she was trying to save 3 years ago. Shine raised an eyebrow. Quietly? The corner of his mouth twitched. Quietly. She set down her cup. You do a lot of things quietly. Most things worth doing don't require an audience. She pondered that for the rest of the afternoon. The proposal went to Ji Young on Thursday, a day ahead of schedule. Shine had slept little the night before, not from anxiety but from the focused intensity that consumed her when something mattered enough to eclipse everything else. She sent it, then forced herself to leave her studio and walk through Seongsu for an hour. Phone switched off. When she returned, she had an email from Ji Young containing 3 words, "Let's move forward," and another from Sang-hoon, arriving 12 minutes later, "Congratulations. You didn't need luck." She read it twice, unsure why. The first time she saw where he actually lived was by accident. She'd been in a meeting near Hannam-dong that ran 2 hours longer than anticipated, and he'd offered his car when the rain started unexpectedly. She declined twice. By the third offer, she was ready enough to accept. His driver took an unusual route. The traffic was heavy. They ended up sitting still for 20 minutes on a bridge, the Han River stretching out on either side, the rain turning the world outside the windows a shifting, vibrant gray. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You're going to regardless," he replied, his eyes on his phone. She almost smiled. "At the gala, before everything happened, what were you actually there for?" He put his phone down and looked out at the river. "There's a boy," he said. 17. Grew up without much. He has a talent for music that no one in his world has the resources to develop." He paused. "The Park Foundation has a youth arts program. I was there to ensure he gets considered for it." Shine turned to look at him fully. "Does he know you did that?" "No." "Why not?" Sang-hoon was quiet for a moment. "Because I don't want him to feel like he owes something to someone like me." Shine looked back at the river. The rain was softening. A boat moved slowly beneath them, its lights a warm orange against the gray water. "Someone like you," she repeated. "How do you mean that?" He didn't answer immediately, and when he did, his voice was softer. "My world has a cost. I try not to let it transfer." It was the most personal thing he'd said to her. A single sentence that opened a door just a crack, leaving it there without forcing her to step through. She didn't push. She filed it away carefully. When the car stopped at her building, she got out and then turned back. "The boy," she said. "What's his name?" Sang-hoon looked at her for a moment. "June." "Tell June," she said. "That talent got him in the room, not anyone's favor." She walked inside, before he could respond. He sat in the car for a moment after, looking at the door she'd gone through. Yun-seo from the front seat said nothing. He was very good at that. Minchae, meanwhile, was watching. She wasn't unintelligent. She had the particular social intelligence of someone who had survived by reading power dynamics before they shifted. And what she was reading now was making her increasingly uncomfortable. Sang-hoon wasn't political. He didn't attend charity galas to be seen. She'd known that for years. He attended when something or someone required it. He'd been to 3 events in the past 2 weeks. All 3 were in Shin's orbit. Minchae sat with this in her salon chair while her stylist worked, and she thought about the woman she'd pushed away from a table 10 days ago. She'd expected humiliation, a withdrawal, the quiet retreat of someone who understood the rules. Instead, Shin Whiteflower had a gallery show confirmed, 3 new media features, and apparently the undivided attention of the most untouchable man in Seoul's underworld. Minchae smiled at herself in the mirror, but it didn't reach her eyes. She picked up her phone and made a quiet call. A favor from an old family connection. Someone who understood how to make professional opportunities dissolve without leaving fingerprints. It wasn't personal, she told herself. It was simply about maintaining order. Shine noticed the pattern before she could prove it. An industry contact went suddenly distant. A photographer she'd worked with for years became vague about availability. A beauty brand partnership she'd been building for 6 months sent a one-line email about restructuring their collaborations. 1 was coincidence. 3 was a message. She pulled Bora into her studio and closed the door. "Someone's coordinating this," she said. "I need you to trace it." Bora was 26, meticulous, and did not scare easily. She nodded once. "Give me 48 hours. She came back in 36 with a folder and an expression that was trying to stay neutral. The connections weren't direct. They never were with people like Minchae. But they were there, a line of quiet withdrawals that, when mapped out, all traced back to overlapping social circles with one consistent point of origin. Shine looked at the folder for a long time. "She's not trying to compete with me," she said finally. "She's trying to erase me." "Yes," Bora said. Shine closed the folder. "Then let's make that impossible," she told Sang-hoon that evening. Not because she needed rescuing. She'd already started her countermove. But because he'd become the person she wanted to think out loud with, which was a development she hadn't entirely prepared for. They were at a noodle place in Mapo, the kind of small and unpretentious restaurant that had nothing to do with either of their public-facing lives. She'd suggested it specifically to see how he'd handle somewhere without a private room or a handled reservation. He'd walked in, sat down, and picked up the laminated menu without a flicker of discomfort. She'd noted that. "So, Minchae is dismantling your support structure," he said after she'd laid it out. Trying to. He was quiet, turning his chopsticks slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing," she said. "I'm handling it. I just wanted you to know." He looked up. "Why?" That was a fair question. She thought about it honestly. "Because you're involved, even if you're not doing anything," she said. "People have noticed that you're spending time in my direction. That makes me a target by association." "You should know that. I knew that before you did," he said simply. She held his gaze. And I'm still here." There was a silence. Not uncomfortable, the kind that settles between two people when something has been established that didn't need a lot of words around it. "She's going to push harder," Shine said. "Yes, and I'm not going to ask you to stop her. I mean it, Sang-hoon. If you move against her because of me, you confirm every narrative about powerful men deciding who gets to stand where. I won't be the reason for that." He nodded once, slowly. "You have my word." She studied him. He held steady under that kind of scrutiny in a way that most people couldn't manage. "Okay," she said, and picked up her chopsticks. They ate in the comfortable quiet of two people who had stopped performing for each other without formally deciding to. "Halfway through," he said without looking up. "The noodles are good here." "They are," she agreed. "I haven't eaten somewhere like this in 4 years." She looked at him. He was focused on his bowl. It wasn't a complaint. It was just a fact. The kind people share when they trust you with the small sadnesses. She didn't make it a big moment. She just said, "We can come back." The way his shoulders released slightly, just fractionally, told her that landed exactly where she meant it to. The midpoint revelation came not from Sang-hoon, but from Yun-seo, who tracked Shin down at her studio one afternoon with the particular apologetic efficiency of someone delivering information they'd been sitting on too long. "There's something he should have told you," Yun-seo said, "and since he won't, I will." Shin put down her brush. Yun-seo told her about a street corner in Hongdae 7 years ago. A mixed-race teenager surrounded by older boys doing the slow, deliberate kind of cruelty that leaves no visible marks. A woman who crossed the street without being asked, stood next to the boy, and with nothing but her presence, dismantled the entire situation. "Who put him on a bus and walked away like it was simply what you did?" "He was in a car at the light," Yun-seo said. "He watched the whole thing. He pulled up community funding proposals the following week. Programs he'd been considering for years and never moved on." Yun-seo paused. "He never knew your name until I mentioned the Gala guest list 6 months ago. Then he pulled up your photograph." Shine sat very still. "And the invitation?" she said. "He arranged it." "Yes." She looked at the wall of photographs across from her. All those young faces. Artists who needed someone to build the room before they could walk into it. She thought about a teenager on a bus 7 years ago, and a decision she'd made without thinking twice. "Why didn't he tell me himself?" she asked. Yun-seo considered this. "Because he didn't want you to feel obligated to him, and because—" He stopped. "Because?" she pressed. "Because you're the only person in his life who treats him like an ordinary man. He's terrified of changing that." Shine looked at the floor for a moment. Then she stood up and picked up her jacket. "Where is he right now?" she asked. She found him at the rooftop garden of the Songsu building, the ordinary one with the folding chairs and the potted plants. She'd been there once before. She thought it was probably where he came when everything else got too heavy. He saw her and went still in the way that meant he already knew why she was there. "Yun-seo," he said. "Yun-seo," she confirmed. She sat down across from him. The city was lit up below them. All that noise and light compressed into something almost peaceful from this height. "You changed my life," he said quietly. Without knowing it, you changed something too. She said, those kids in the programs, June. The archive Ji Young was trying to save. She looked at him. You do a lot of things for people who will never know your name. It's easier that way. I know. She leaned back in her chair. I've spent my whole career doing work that gets praised as inspirational, groundbreaking, diverse. She said those words with a particular flatness. People love what I represent. Very few of them want to know who I actually am. He was quiet, listening. You asked about the exhibition in the gallery, she said. The actual questions, what the artists wanted to say, not what the narrative around them would look like. Nobody does that. I noticed, he said simply. So did I. She met his eyes. That's why I'm still here. Something moved through his expression. Not sentimentality, but something quieter and more durable than that. Like a man who had braced for a different kind of world and found unexpectedly that it had something good in it. They sat there for a long time. Neither of them pushed it further than that. But when she left that evening, something had changed. Both of them knew it, and neither of them said so, because some things don't need to be announced to be real. Midway through the following week, Minchae doubled down. She reached out directly to the ceramicist, Shine's Etowon collaborator, through a mutual contact, and offered him a platform significantly larger than anything Shine's exhibition could provide. A solo feature, wider reach, better exposure. He called Shine immediately. I want you to know I said no, he said before she could speak. But I thought you should know she's making moves this close to the show. After the call, Shine sat at her desk and thought about Minchae for the first time. Not with frustration, but with something closer to pity. She was working this hard, burning this many favors. For what? To keep one black woman out of rooms she'd already built her own way into? The answer, Shine had come to understand, wasn't really about her at all. It never had been. Minchae had built her entire sense of safety on controlling access. Shine's existence, particularly Shine thriving without permission, was a structural threat to every wall Minchae had constructed between herself and the fear underneath. Understanding that didn't make it forgivable, but it made it legible. And legible problems, in Shine's experience, were solvable ones. She called an emergency meeting with her full team the next morning. Bora, the ceramicist, the photographer, the stylist, 2 other featured artists. She laid out exactly what had happened, who was behind the disruption, and what it had cost them so far. She didn't minimize it. She also didn't catastrophize it. Here's what we're not doing, she said. We're not going silent. We're not accepting replacements, and we're not giving anyone the satisfaction of watching this fall apart. Here's what we are doing. She laid the new plan on the table. Smaller scope on the venue, tighter guest list, more direct community outreach. A short, honest video from Bora's account about the behind-the-scenes struggle without naming names. Just the truth of what it took to build something like this without institutional backing. If the establishment won't hold space for us, Shine said, we hold it for ourselves. We've done it before. The ceramicist slapped the table once, lightly, in agreement. Bora was already typing. The photographer said, I'll shoot the setup for free. What time do you need me? The meeting lasted 90 minutes. By the end of it, they had a plan. Shine laughed, feeling something she recognized as stubborn joy. The specific satisfaction of deciding that an obstacle is simply a detour and moving accordingly. Sang-hoon heard about the video before he saw it. 3 people sent it to him within an hour of it being posted. He watched it once. Bora speaking directly to camera, calm and matter-of-fact, saying that building something for communities that get overlooked is hard, that doors get closed, that it happens more than people realize, and that they were building anyway. Nothing accusatory, nothing dramatic, just true. The comments were already filling up, people sharing their own versions of the same story, others asking how to support. The thing was spreading in the way that only genuinely honest things spread, not because it was engineered to, but because it touched something real. He made one call that evening, not to stop anything, not to protect Shine. He'd given his word and he kept it. He called a rival with whom he'd been negotiating a business arrangement for 4 months, and he restructured the deal in a way that released 3 of Minchae's key pressure points. It cost him positioning, a concession he hadn't planned to make. He didn't tell Shine. He hadn't done it for her. He'd done it because Minchae was using his proximity to Shine as a weapon, and he refused to be someone else's tool, not even passively. He found out. Shine learned about it the following afternoon when she appeared at his building unannounced for the first time. His security called up. He told them to let her through. She walked into his office, which was nothing like people imagined. Clean and quiet, one wall of bookshelves, no displays of power. She looked around at once, then at him. "You made a concession," she said. "It was a business decision. Yun-seo has a very efficient information network. I'm aware." He set down his pen. "Are you angry?" She considered that. "No, but I want to understand something." She sat down across from him without being invited, which he noted was very Shin. "What made you draw the line there? Why that move? Why now?" "Because Min-jun was using the fact of knowing me as a weapon against you," he said. "That's my problem to solve, not yours. Even at cost to yourself?" "Especially at cost to myself." She was quiet for a moment, looking at him with a focused assessment of someone recalibrating. "You could have told me," she said finally. "I didn't want you to feel like you owed me something." "I don't owe you anything," she said immediately. And then, a beat later, "But I'd still like to know. When something that affects me happens, I want to know, even if it's solved. Does that make sense?" "Yes," he said. And then, with the particular honesty that had become the foundation of what they were building between them, "I'm used to carrying things alone. It's a habit I'm working on. So am I," she said. She looked around his office again, landed on the bookshelf, stood up and walked to it, pulling out a thin volume that looked well read. A collection of Korean poetry. The spine cracked from being opened many times. She raised an eyebrow at him. "Everyone needs somewhere to be human," he said, with a self-awareness that was almost shy. She put it back carefully and turned around. "Come to the exhibition," she said. "Not as backup, not as a presence. Just as a person who wants to see something worth seeing." He looked at her for a long moment. "What time does it start?" 3 days before the exhibition, it reached its lowest point. The venue withdrawal came first. The confirmed space in Gangnam, citing renovation schedules that hadn't existed 2 weeks ago. Then, a third of the vendor confirmations dissolved inside of 18 hours. Bora delivered the damage report with the composure of someone who had decided that staying calm was the most useful thing she could do. "We're 3 days out," she said. "We don't have a venue." "I know," Shine said. She sat with it for exactly 10 minutes. Then she started making calls. Not to sponsors, not to power brokers. She called the ceramicist, the photographer, the hairstylist who had cried the first time Shine featured her work. The mixed-race makeup artist from Busan she'd mentored for 2 years by video before they ever met in person. She called every artist in the exhibition and told them the truth. "I need help. If you have nothing to offer, I understand completely. You owe me nothing. If you have something, I'm listening." The ceramicist family owned a converted warehouse in Mappo. He offered it before she finished the sentence. The photographer showed up with a crew of 12 the next morning. The Busan artist posted a single video that said, "This exhibition was built for people like us, and someone is trying to stop it. Come anyway." By that evening, Shine had 200 messages from strangers, offering everything from lighting equipment to food to muscle to help hang artwork. People she'd never met who had seen something honest online and decided they wanted to be part of it. What had been pulled apart from above was being rebuilt from below. Faster, with more noise, and with an energy that no coordinated sabotage campaign could manufacture. And then something unexpected happened. June showed up. The boy Sang-hoon had quietly worked to get into the Park Foundation Arts program. 17 years old, with a face that still held the remnants of someone who'd spent years bracing himself for disappointment. He came to the warehouse on the second day of setup and asked quietly if there was anything he could do. Shine didn't know who he was at first. She just handed him a hammer and pointed it at the wall. He worked for 6 hours without complaint, then stayed to help organize the artist's statements. Somewhere in the middle of reading one, a young photographer from Lagos who wrote about what it felt like to love a city that had never loved her back. He went quiet in a way that Shine recognized. She brought him a water bottle and sat down next to him on the floor. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, but didn't speak for a moment. "I didn't know," he said eventually, "that other people felt this way. Like exactly this way." "A lot of people feel exactly this way," Shine said. "They just don't usually get a platform to say so." He looked at the photograph in front of him. "Why are you giving them one?" Shine thought about the honest answer. "Because someone once stood next to me when I needed it," she said. "And I've been paying it forward ever since." She didn't tell him about the street corner. She didn't know he was connected to Sang-hoon. She just handed him another artist statement, and they sat in comfortable silence while the warehouse transformed around them. Later that night, Sang-hoon answered a call from the program director at the Park Foundation, who mentioned that a teenager named June had apparently spent his entire day off volunteering at an art exhibition in Mapo. Sang-hoon put his phone down and smiled at nothing in particular. It was the first time Yun-seo had seen him do that in years. This story is speaking to something in you. Share it. Pass it to someone who needs to hear that dignity is not something granted. It's something you build, protect, and carry. Stay with Quinn's Afro-Korea Diaries. The exhibition opened on a Saturday. The warehouse was transformed. Warm light, high ceilings, work from 32 artists on every wall, each piece accompanied by the artist's own words in Korean and English. The stories weren't polished. They were real. Some were funny, some were devastating. All of them were true. By 8 o'clock, the space was full. Not with the elite crowd the original venue would have drawn, with people, art students and community leaders, and curious strangers who had seen the video and wanted to be part of something that felt like it was about something real. A mother from Incheon stood in front of a portrait of a mixed-race girl and started crying quietly. Her daughter, maybe 9, with the alert wide eyes of a child who understands more than adults assume, reached up and held her hand without asking why. Shin saw it from across the room and had to stop for a moment. This was exactly what 3 years of work had always been for. She moved through the room greeting people, stopping to talk with artists about their pieces, watching strangers strike up conversations in front of the photographs. She wasn't performing graciousness. She was genuinely here, genuinely present, genuinely moved by what the room had become. She didn't see Sang-hoon arrive, but she felt it. The particular quality of stillness that certain people carry into a space. He'd come alone, no entourage. In dark clothes, standing near the back, holding a glass of water and looking at a photograph on the far wall, a young black woman in Seoul's subway, photographed from behind, looking out the window at the city passing in the dark. Shin made her way to him eventually. "What do you see?" she asked, nodding at the photograph. He was quiet for a moment. "Someone deciding something. I don't know what, but something important." Shin looked at the photograph. The artist, the one from Busan, had written in her statement that it was taken at the moment she decided to stop leaving Seoul every time it made her feel unwelcome. "She decided to stay," Shine said. He glanced at her sidelong. "Good decision." Their eyes met briefly. Then Shine turned back to the room, back to her exhibition, her artists, her community. He stayed the whole evening, and when a visiting documentary filmmaker who'd come on a tip started asking around about who had organized all of this, 3 different people pointed at Shine. Not at Sang-hoon. Not at a donor or a foundation or a sponsor. At Shine. He watched that happen from across the room, and something in his expression that had been held tight for a very long time let go. The aftermath of the exhibition moved faster than anyone planned for. The documentary filmmaker released a short piece online 2 weeks later. It was 11 minutes long and focused on how the event had been rebuilt in 72 hours after the original venue collapsed. It didn't mention Minchae. It didn't need to. What it showed was community organizing at a pace and scale that made the establishment look slow and brittle by comparison. The piece was shared 40,000 times in the first week. A foundation in London reached out by the end of the month, then one in Toronto, then an international beauty platform that wanted to build a mentorship pipeline specifically for Black and mixed-race artists working across Asian markets. Exactly, specifically, with uncanny precision what Shine had spent 3 years working toward. She didn't say yes immediately. She read every proposal, line by line, asked for it to cross-check organizational histories, went back with 23 questions, got 23 satisfactory answers, and then, and only then, said yes. The meeting in London was 3 hours long, and she attended alone. She came back with a partnership agreement and a start date for the first cohort, and she called Sang-hoon from Incheon Airport while her luggage was being collected, because he was the first person she wanted to tell. "It's happening," she said, and she could hear herself smiling through the words. "I know," he said. "Yun-seo already congratulated you on my behalf 3 times. That's very efficient of him. He's enthusiastic," she laughed. "Sang-hoon, yes, thank you. Not for doing anything, just for," she thought about how to say it right, "for treating me like someone who could handle her own life." A pause, and then, quietly, "Thank you for reminding me I'm still a person." She didn't say anything back. She didn't need to. Minchae attended the Foundation's premier international event. She came the way she always arrived everywhere, expecting to be recognized. She was. By people who had once depended on her approval and no longer did. by artists she dismissed who were now receiving international recognition, by industry figures who had spent years watching her wield access like a gatekeeper and were now building networks that didn't require her to unlock anything. She wasn't confronted. Nobody made a scene. She simply discovered that the room didn't rearrange itself around her. The conversations didn't pause when she entered. The people she'd spent years collecting as social currency were busy talking to each other, talking to the artists, talking to the young mentees from the first cohort who moved through the space with the particular confidence of people who had been told for the first time that their perspective was worth something. Minchae found a seat near the back and watched. She watched Shin move through the room, not as a symbol, not as someone groundbreaking or diverse or inspirational, but as a specific, particular, complicated person who seemed to know exactly who she was and had never once asked the room's permission to be it. Something in Minchae fractured, a silent, internal crack. It wasn't a performance. It was a raw, felt truth. A fissure had opened through the very bedrock of her carefully constructed safety. The girl she'd once been understood, belonging as a scarce commodity, a territory to be fiercely defended lest it be lost, a zero-sum game where inviting someone else in meant being unceremoniously ejected. But as she surveyed this room, brimming with warmth and a livelier-than-expected buzz of genuine enjoyment, a slow, reluctant understanding dawned. It didn't have to be that way. This space hadn't been forged by pushing anyone out. It had been painstakingly assembled by a stubborn refusal to believe the table was ever truly full. She slipped away before the speeches, finding solace in the cool night air outside. There was no grand transformation, no miraculous revelation that set everything right. She was simply weary, bone-deep, soul-deep weary of the relentless effort to safeguard something that had never offered her any real sense of security. Perhaps it was a beginning, perhaps not. Yet, there she stood in the darkness, allowing herself to feel it all. Sang-hoon occupied a seat in the third row, not on the stage, not front and center, not anywhere that demanded the room's particular attention. Just a man in a sharp suit, observing something he'd played a small, precise, and intentionally placed role in bringing into existence. Jun was there too, 4 rows back, his jacket a touch too large, yet worn with the quiet gravitas of someone who grasped the significance of the occasion. He'd been accepted into the Park Foundation Arts Program. His inaugural project was a musical composition titled Quietly and Without Explanation, Hongdae 2018, a piece that meant little to most, but everything to one. As the program concluded, and the room transformed into a lively celebration, Shine sought out Sang-hoon. It was she who initiated the encounter. She navigated the throng and paused before him, their eyes meeting with the unforced familiarity of 2 souls who had long since outgrown the need to impress each other. "There's someone I'd like you to meet," she announced, guiding him across the room towards Jun, who stood slightly apart, engrossed in a piece displayed on the wall. "Jun," Shine said. He turned, his gaze falling on Sang-hoon. A complex flicker crossed his face. Recognition, a hint of bewilderment, and then a settling into a quiet understanding. Sang-hoon extended his hand. "I heard about your composition," he said. "The program director mentioned it." Jun clasped his hand. "I heard you funded half the building," he countered. Blunt, honest, and undeniably 17. Sang-hoon glanced at Shine, a subtle question in his eyes. She offered a small, raised eyebrow, a silent acknowledgement of her selective disclosures. "The building did its job," Sang-hoon replied to Jun. "You did the rest." Jun's gaze shifted between them, as if reaching a private conclusion. He gave a single nod, then returned his attention to the artwork. For a moment, Shine and Sang-hoon stood side by side, watching him. "He's going to be extraordinary," she murmured. "Yes," Sang-hoon agreed. "He already is." When he offered her his arm to navigate back through the room, she accepted. It felt old-fashioned, a touch formal, and perfectly suited to them both. They moved through a space teeming with individuals too caught up in celebrating their own burgeoning futures to spare them more than a passing glance. And that was precisely how Shine had always envisioned it. Not a woman defined by her companions, nor a man by what he could provide. Simply 2 people who had carried their burdens for too long alone, finding in each other not a savior, nor a sanctuary, but a reason to set some of it down. The gatekeepers, so keen to guard their enclosures, often discover too late that the future belongs to those who dare to build wider tables. "And Shane Whiteflower?" She didn't just build a bigger table, she erected the entire room. And then, she empowered a generation of artists to construct their own. Quinn's Afro-Korean Diaries. Subscribe for more stories where the love is real, the stakes are high, and the women always know exactly who they are.